European politics. It's complicated, right?
Luckily, there's a podcast that helps make sense of it.
It's called The Europeans.
Every week, we break down the biggest stories in European politics.
Can I disagree slightly with the premise of your question?
Go for it.
I think some European leaders may actually prefer Donald Trump.
And some quirky non-political stories you probably missed.
Vilnius, the G-spot of Europe. Nobody knows where it is, but once you find it, it's amazing.
The Europeans.
New episodes every Thursday.
Welcome to Rome. This is The Bittersweet Life with Katy Sewell and Tiffany Parks. Hello, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Tiffany in Rome, Katy in Seattle. And Tiffany, today's topic came to you in what, a yoga class? A Pilates class?
Pilates, yes. Unfortunately, they don't have yoga at my gym at any kind of hour that I am available. So,
okay. What happened that makes a great topic in Pilates?
So the class that I take is almost entirely women, as I would assume most Pilates classes are. But there's always like one guy in it. There's at least one guy. It's usually the same old guy, but occasionally another guy or two will pop in. But it's usually just this one guy. And what struck me during one of these lessons, and it strikes me often, is that when the instructor is talking to us as a group, as you do when you're teaching a class, she always addresses us as if we were all males.
Yeah,
obviously
what would she say? Tell us it in Italian.
She would say, "Allora ragazzi, cominciamo," like, which means like, "Okay, guys, let's start." But ragazzi, guys, I mean, I guess in this case you could say guys to women too. You can say you guys. Okay, so maybe that's a bad example. But ragazzi literally means boys or male children. It can even be like teenagers and young adults. It's a term that is used much older than in the States. Like I think in America, like you stop saying boy around 18, but here it goes quite a way older. But it's the masculine version. And it's true that you use the masculine gender, masculine plural, in a group of mixed gender. Obviously, that's just one of the rules of Italian. But it strikes me as really weird when it's all women and one guy. You know, like that one guy, like your sex organs are so important that they override all of the other people in the room. You know, and I know that this is just a linguistics thing, and I'm not like taking offense at it. That's an exaggerated expression, but it does kind of annoy me that it has to be that way. Now, obviously, you're not going to like count up how many people are in the room and like, okay, one more women than man, so we're going to use the feminine. Obviously, that's not practical. At a certain point, you have to decide. But of course, you know, it's always going to go male, right? No matter what, if it's a romance language, at least, it's always going to favor the male gender first. And it's just odd. Or she'll say something like, allora, tutte, she'll say tutti, like everybody, tutti. With an I, that's masculine plural. With an E, it would be masculine feminine. So that's just another word that she'll use when she's talking to us. And I just find it, like I said, I just find it annoying. And that one guy cancels out every other woman in the group.
Yeah. So have you been there when there is no guy and it's different? Like she's not one of those people that's just kind of slid into the guys category where you just always
No,
address...
I think that I have been in a class when there aren't any men in there and she doesn't do it. She says tutte. And one time she slipped. So like clearly she just wasn't, she wasn't thinking. She said tutte even though there was a guy there, but it was clearly like a mistake. It's grammatically a mistake. But it's weird because I feel like in English, we don't, I mean, of course, I don't want to open the whole can of, the gender issues that are going on right now. I don't want to open that can of worms, but it is something that I feel like we're sensitive to in the States, and we don't necessarily in the English language have to, we're not forced to acknowledge someone's gender if we don't want to. I don't think it's appropriate. And it just seems like Italian and probably all the other Romance languages, not, I'm not saying that this is a purposeful thing. It's just how the language is designed.
Yeah.
It makes the speaker highly aware of the gender of the people that they're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
For this reason, I find that interesting. That the gender is so important. You would call someone by a different thing or call a group of people in a different way if there's one, if they're male or female.
Mm-hmm. Whereas in the States, we might say, well, we wouldn't do it in a Pilates class probably, but we would say always like ladies and gentlemen, or, this person and that person, if we're addressing a big group of people. I think in a Pilates class, it probably would be guys. All right, guys, let's go. But I think that would be universal to whether or not the class was all women or men or not. Yeah, or they might say everybody, all right, everyone, let's get going.
Yeah.
I could definitely, and all of those would kind of be okay.
I used to teach yoga at an all-women's gym, and I don't feel like I ever said, all right, ladies. Like, I just feel like I was very young at the time, and most of the women in my classes were older than me, so I felt that would be a little condescending if I said ladies to them. So I probably said, everybody or, what have you.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yes, it's true that in English we say guys, but I think that's an exception. That we can use guys for girls, because that term, when you're talking about more than one person, is an exception.
I mean,
that you can use it for women.
Right. So, of course, the larger question here that we'll probably not be able to solve, but we can certainly debate, is do the Romance languages then, based on that it tips toward the man if a man is present in many more terms than just greeting a Pilates class, that means that subtly the culture is tipped more to men because the language tipped more toward men.
I think that all of these, because I kind of went down a rabbit hole looking up other instances of sexism in language, and I think that it can't but do that. Like, it has to. I mean, it might be a subtle thing, but it's there. And I think just like we have words in the English language that, only recently have we sort of de-gendered them, like chairman and congressman. I mean, like, it used to be just congressman, point blank. There was never anything, there was never a congresswoman. It was just congressman, and it was chairman. And now we've had to we've had to either create new words or just use like congressperson, use a neutral word. Mm-hmm. And this made me think about the French language, because I was talking to a French lady one day. We were talking kind of about this idea, but not exactly the same way. She said, in French, they have finally created words for professions that are female. And she's like, they finally created a word that means professor, female professor, professeur with an E on the end instead of professeur. And she was like, finally, they made a female word for professor. And I was like, that's so weird, because in English, they're starting to do the opposite. Like, women who are actresses are starting to refer to themselves as actors, and waitresses are starting to refer to themselves sometimes as waiters, because they don't want their gender to be accentuated. They don't want it to have the emphasis to be on gender. So they're like, well, the neutral word is actually actor. That's a neutral word. So I'm going to go for actor. And I don't want to call myself an actress, because that's just like saying poetess, for example. Like in the 19th century, they used to say, oh, she's a poetess or she's an authoress. And it was kind of a degrading term, because it meant like, you're not a real author, right? You're a lady author. You're a lady poet. And so in English, I feel like the creation of these female profession words was almost a step backwards, with the exception of chairwoman. Obviously, that feels better. I don't know. That's what's so interesting about this topic, is that there's so much gray area to it. But she was saying, no, like, there was no word for female professor. There was no word for, a female doctor until now. And she was very happy about that.
Well, it's interesting because here, like in English, there are also more and more the creation of the neutral word, so even rather than waiter now, they haven't come up with a neutral word for actor yet, but even with waiter now, we might be more likely to call them a server, or it's sort of like, rather than the stewardess in the store, they're now flight attendants. Could be anybody. It's almost like you're just naming what the job might say on a application, I'm applying for server,
Yeah, it's easier to do that in English, I think, because we don't have our articles are not gender specific. We just have one definite article and one indefinite article, and they're the same for obviously objects in English have no gender, but people do have genders, and it's just the man, the woman, the actor, the actress. And so in English, I feel like a word like server can be totally neutral because there's no la or il in front of it, On the other hand, French, it's le professeur. So you can't say that's a neutral word because it has a masculine article in front of it.
Right. And they wouldn't put like a female article in front of the masculine name of the position.
Well, I don't think in French, no. But in Italian, they do.
Oh.
And in Italian, there are so many more gender rules than I ever thought. In Italian, like learning Italian, you learn the gender, you learn, okay, these words are masculine, these words are feminine. Slowly you pick it up. But there is there's many distinctions in the words and their genders. So I actually got out Aurelio's notebook to check this because I can never remember. And he's always asking me these questions. Is this a common gender or is this a promiscuous gender, they call it? And I'm like, I have no idea. Check your book. So this
Aurelio, I should mention for the new listeners here, her son, 9 years old.
My fourth grader. So he made this little diagram, which I can barely read because it's written so small. But I didn't know this until he brought this home from school. But there are different types of genders. And obviously, it's just male and female. We don't have a neuter in Italian. But there's what's called a defective gender. I mean, I'm translating from Italian, genere difettivo. And it's when a name can only be masculine or only be feminine. So you can't change it. So for example, could be like, now I'm trying to think of an example. And if he were here, it would be way easier. Because, okay, gonna. Okay, I just looked at a picture. A gonna is a skirt. La gonna, it's feminine. It's never going to be masculine. You can't masculinize the word gonna and say gono and say like, okay, that's a man's dress. It just, or skirt. It just doesn't. It's either masculine or feminine. And it's never going to change. And then you've got the genere desinenza, which is when if you change one or some of the final letters, it can change from masculine to feminine. And this is usually used for people. So il pittore, la pittrice, the painter, the female painter. I should say the male painter, the female painter. Yeah, I know. I was just totally sexist right myself right there. So, il dottore, la dottoressa, the male doctor, the female doctor. So that's another type of gender. Then there's what they call the common gender, which is when the word is the same, whether it's masculine or feminine, and it's only the article that comes before it that tells you if it's masculine or feminine. So that's when you were saying, like, could you put a female article in front of this same word? And in Italian, you can, but only certain words. So giornalista, despite the fact that the word ends with an A, journalist, it can be masculine or feminine. So you can say il giornalista, la giornalista, and the word doesn't change. And there are several more examples of that. Again, usually professions or people. And then
let me ask you one other question. Backing up.
Yeah.
So the one before the common one was called what? Because we have the...
Desinenza, or the desinenza is the ending that changes. So I'm not sure what that type of gender is
like
called.
How it would translate into English. Common.
Well, that's your actor actress.
Right.
That's your waiter waitress.
Yeah. Okay.
The last words change. And I have no idea. I wouldn't know how to translate the word desinenza.
Okay.
If I had to. It's not suffix. It's more specific than a suffix, but
that's
it's a gender.
But that's not the promiscuous version.
No.
Okay.
No, we're getting
I can't
there.
wait for that one.
There's two more. There's two more.
Goodness.
I'm like, Howie had no idea Italian was so complex. The promiscuous gender is when the name remains this always. I'm sorry, I can barely read this. Quando il nome rimane sempre uguale per distinguere il genere bisogna esplicitarlo. So it's a word. It's usually an animal. So the word doesn't change, but you have to say okay, so the word doesn't change and the gender doesn't change, but you have to say basically like feminine or masculine after. So like balena means whale. Always going to be la balena because it is at its base a feminine word, but there are boy whales, right?
Right. I
You
hope
have
so.
to say, yeah. Otherwise, we'd have a bigger whale problem than we do. So if you want to say the female whale, or sorry, if you want to say the male whale, because the word is feminine, you can't say il baleno. It doesn't exist. You have to say la balena maschio. You have to actually say male. And there are obviously male animals that then you have to say female. Like, I'm trying to remember, I think he had to do a whole worksheet and we had to look through and be like, I don't know. I had to look them all up in the dictionary because I'm like, I have no idea if this is what kind of gender this is. I'm looking through his notebook, but I can't find it.
Oh, like a rhinoceros.
Promiscuo. All right. Antilope, antelope, bison, elk, deer. So those are some of the words that you have to specify. This is masculine or this is feminine, because the article goes with the word and can't be changed. And then the last kind is independent gender, which is when the name changes completely from masculine to feminine. Like it's totally different. And I can't think of an example of that right now. I think maybe like la mucca, the cow, and il bue, like the steer. So even in English, those words are not anything alike. But that could be an example.
Yeah, like the female cow has its own name, and the male cow has its own name.
Exactly, and they're not related to each other.
Wow.
So I know that was a lot, but I just wanted to highlight how important gender is in a language. That there are all these different layers and shades of gray, and I just think, wow. I mean, again, I don't want to go and open a can of worms here, but is gender really that important?
I mean, if the entire language is based on gender, I feel like in a former language conversation, we talked about how occasionally it just feels so random about like why is a certain fruit end with an A versus like a certain fruit ends, why is that fruit masculine and the other fruit is feminine,
Like la banana.
Well, I mean, that one seems...
The banana is female. And yes, seno, I've said before, which means bosom, is masculine. Sometimes it feels like there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah. And it is an interesting thought to be like, how does it subtly affect the culture? Like, do you feel slightly differently towards a female banana than you would if it was a male banana? I don't know.
If I had to, I'm not a native Italian speaker, but if I had to guess, I would say it doesn't make that much of a difference. I think the professions are more where you're getting the sexism creeping in. But with inanimate objects, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if Italians wanna write in, I'm just looking at objects around me to like get ideas of what, like la matita. Pencil is feminine. So is pen, la penna, la carta, paper. Il quaderno is masculine, though. The notebook. Il libro is also masculine. I feel like there must be. I mean, it must be connected to Latin at its base. But I mean, again, somebody eventually had to have decided. So who knows? Who knows what the thought was? And the interesting thing is that across Romance languages, even though they're so closely connected, there are some gender differences in objects. Not a lot. Most of them stay the same, but they do often change.
You mean from like Italian to Spanish, French to Italian? Yeah.
Yes. And then you've got German, which is like, okay, we're going to have a feminine and we're going to have a masculine and we're going to have a neutral. And a lot of things are just going to have no gender. And it's like, okay, what goes into that thought process as well? Like, who decides what objects have no gender and why? Like, if they have the concept of an object not having a gender, if that seems rational for them, for an object not to have a gender, why have genders at all?
I mean, it seems rational that a pen doesn't have a gender to me.
I know, as an English speaker, it does feel weird.
Because you're just like, well, I mean, it's just a pen. I guess my pen's name is Uniball. I don't know if that makes it feel more masculine or feminine. But it is a fine tip. So
I'm not gonna go there. There's too many potential dirty jokes here.
Very interesting. I mean, since it is just sort of following the grammar, which of course, for listeners who are learning a language, the most mortifying thing sometimes is trying to speak it and messing up something very common, like even which article you put in front of a word. You're so much more advanced than that.
I still make mistakes though.
Yeah, but it makes me wonder, like, okay, so the language is secondary to you. So you're in a Pilates class and you notice this guy is here and all of a sudden she's calling us guys rather than ladies. Why in the world is that? I wonder if you're raised in a language, then it's like you don't even track that.
I think you don't track it.
Yeah, because that's just what's proper. That's you speaking properly.
Yeah, and I do think that Romance languages, and I'm sure German as well, but I have less familiarity with German, but they're very strict. Like, I feel like English is a very fluid language. Like, we come up with new words all the time, and nobody has to approve them. They just get added, like, they get added to dictionaries. I mean, I guess somebody technically, who's making the dictionary has to decide, okay, this word is going in. But it's very, very common for words to be added to dictionaries, to people to make up words, start calling people chairwomen when that technically the term had never existed before. In French particularly, but I also think Italian, like there's such a strict sort of respect for the language that people, I was reading this article about it, a lot of language purists were horrified when they invented the word professeur because they're like, it's barbarism. It's not a real word. It's a fake word. How can you completely create a new word? Whereas in English, we're just like, okay, we just throw it out there, and if it's not in the dictionary, so what? We're going to use it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in English isn't, we'll use words from other languages too. We're just like, yeah, I like that one. I'm just going to start throwing adios in there with me, like with my friends, like, hey, adios. We'll just take whatever and incorporate it into
well, Italians, as we've talked about, they do love using English words. So English is not the only language that borrows foreign words. But when it comes to the officially recognized French words, there is a panel of language experts who decides. And if they decide that's not a word, it's not a word. You can't use it. I mean, obviously you can use it in your spoken language, but it's not correct. So you couldn't use it like in an academic paper or in a newspaper or in a book.
Do you have any idea if Italy used to have this, given that, there used to be a very different Roman dialect at one time, and because wherever you travel in Italy, the language changes, at least in how it's spoken, ever so slightly based on what region you're in?
Yeah, I think Italy is a bit less strict than French, I would assume. But there are also, there's certain, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, of a very important Italian language sort of cultural association that, there are the people who geek out over language and who feel like they're the gatekeepers of the Italian language and would possibly be up in arms if Italians like invented new words.
Well, we have an audience of men and women here, probably some they thems as well. How would you address them properly? Like if you were going to sign off the show.
I mean, grammatically, we got to use tutti, everybody.
Yep. Masculine.
Fortunately, I don't like it, but it's the way it is.
Well, it's very interesting to contemplate.
Just you saying, that we have surely got some they thems listening. Like I have never ever seen in an Italian email, not that I get that many, especially professional emails from Italians, but I have never seen pronouns explicitly marked, no matter what pronouns they are. I've never seen an Italian do that. So I don't know if that's not a thing here, or I'm not sure. I'll have to investigate that.
If you were going to write an email that said, Tiffany, she, her, under your bio line, how would you even write that in Italian? What would she, her be if it was blank/blank?
Lei. It would be lei. I mean, it would be lei. I think it's the same both ways. As an object or as a subject, I think it's always lei.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Lei.
So you could be like just Le Tiffany. That probably is grammatically incorrect as well. Very interesting. All right. Well, if you have any thoughts on whether or not the Romance languages are sexist, especially if you speak them on a regular basis.
Or if any other languages that we don't know about are sexist.
That's true. That's true. If you speak
I'm sure they are.
Oh, I'm sure. Or if you think that the English language is sexist. Maybe we've missed some aspects where it's really sexist too. I would love to hear it. You can always send us an email, bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on social media. Just look for us on Instagram, Bittersweet Life Podcast, I believe. And yeah, share your thoughts. Let us know what you think. And I don't know, you could also throw in your favorite masculine or feminine word if you're currently studying a foreign language. I would love to hear those as well. Okay.
And if you need a break, if you need a change of scenery, if your soul is yearning for a little bit of levity and a bit of wonder and some amazing art and food, then come to Rome with us in October, because we are organizing an amazing week-long adventure in Rome. Katy and I will be there. We'll be hanging out with a very small number of our listeners, of whom you could be one or two. And it's a great way to see Rome from a totally new perspective. Even if you know Rome, if you've been to Rome, you will see a different side of Rome with us. If you've never been to Rome, it's a great way to be introduced to the city and to see it really from, in a more, holistic way, to get to understand the history, to get to understand the art in context. And the bonus is that you can take a break. If you've been stressed out about, current events or anything like that, you can just block that all out for a week and come and hang out with us instead.
Yes, the people who came with us last year really did say that it gave them this respite from everything that was happening in the world, and honestly gave them a slightly new perspective on everything as well, which it's great to kind of completely tweak your understanding, and somehow getting to know Rome in a deep and intimate way can tweak your understanding of a lot of things, your own life, history, the history that we live in, the world we live in today.
Yeah, and when you see things that are so old coexisting in a city, in a modern city with modern things, it does put into perspective the moment in history that we're living in. And you kind of feel like, okay, this is honestly just a drop in the bucket. This is a blip. This is just a short moment. The sky is not falling and everything's going to be okay. Because if Rome survived Caligula, and Nero, and Commodus, it's a pretty resilient world.
Yes. Well, the trip is from the 5th to the 11th in October, one of the most beautiful times of year to be in Rome. You can find information in our show notes. You can find it at our website, thebittersweetlife.net. We do have some rooms available, and we would love to have you join us. So reach out and let's go to Rome together. That sounds great.
Andiamo.
And until next time, this is The Bittersweet Life. I'm Katy Sewell.
I'm Tiffany Parks.
Join us again. Bye. We welcome your feedback, show topic ideas, or questions. You can always reach the show by emailing bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com or through thebittersweetlife.net.